That was a fancy introduction tonight.
I know. Every time I see that, I'm like, dang, I gotta upgrade mine. It's so good.
I tried to run one on the back of the other one tonight, and I thought we'll give it a try and see what happens. So,
yeah, well done.
Hello, Katie. How are you?
Hi, Bruce. I'm doing good today. It's nice to see you again. 2 times in 1 week after not seeing you for 2 months. So good to see you.
It seems like 24 hours since I last spoke to you.
Wow, I wonder why that
is. So, rather than me messing around with Katie's introduction, I'll let Katie introduce herself. She'll be able to do it a lot better than me. But Katie, introduce yourself.
Sure. Just briefly, my name is Katie Lain. I'm a success story of naltrexone and the Sinclair method. I started on the treatment in July of 2017. And over the course of a year, just saw myself truly gain control back over alcohol and just gradually become uninterested in alcohol and seeing myself prefer alcohol-free time most days. And I was someone who was a 7-day-a-week drinker for nearly 10 years. 1 alcohol-free day each week was pretty much impossible for me to do. So I really started to be confident that this treatment was working for me within the first month on it. I was still drinking 5, 6 days a week at that point, but I could see some changes of me just leaving unfinished wine in the glass and maybe taking longer to finish my drink and having the ability to have an alcohol-free day that wasn't just white-knuckled forcing myself not to drink. So these were some early signs that I knew it was working. And after a year on the treatment, I tell people I accidentally quit drinking because I just lost interest in alcohol to the point where just didn't care about it enough anymore to drink anymore. It didn't add anything to my life. And I never expected that to happen because I started the treatment with the goal to drink moderately. And yeah, now I haven't drank in about 5 years and still keep naltrexone just in case I want to drink. But of course, I don't take it because I use the Sinclair method, which only requires taking it an hour before drinking. And now I've been an advocate for the treatment since day one, pretty much, and work with individuals to help them through it as well.
So explain a little bit about your program. Explain a little bit about what you do and how you do it.
Yeah. You mean like our program or Thrive?
Yeah.
Or,
yeah.
Yeah. So we launched an official, Sinclair method program at Thrive Alcohol Recovery about 2 years ago. I have a collaborator and partner named Karen, who's also a success story of the treatment. And after being a one-on-one coach and a group facilitator for the Sinclair method space, for, I don't know, like 4 years now, I started coaching pretty quickly. Just really felt the need to have a unified program where someone could come and get everything they need on the Sinclair method, and it would be in one place and they could have access for as long as they need. Because as a coach, what I was doing is I'd have a coaching session and then I'd have to send them like a list of resources to follow up, before our next session, and was sending them all over the place. And really just wanted to have a program that was designed specifically for TSM because it's such a unique protocol and there's so many nuances to it. And because it's a long-term treatment protocol, lots of things can come up, we kind of say there's 3 phases of the method. So we really want to offer support and guidance for people specific to this method because there's other online alcohol programs. I worked for one of them called RIA Health, and they're a great program, but they're not TSM specific. So people get more like general support on the method, and I really want to dive deep and guide people through this specific protocol. And I know that's what you do as well, Bruce, because it's such an effective method when it's done correctly and given enough time to work. Those are the 2 keys. It needs to be done correctly and it needs to be given enough time to work. I recently had a client tell me who's in our program, and we always hit home that this is a long-term protocol. You need to give it time. And he was 6 weeks in and he's like, if I didn't know that or have that mindset that it was going to take time, I might have given up by now, because he hadn't seen enough progress in 6 weeks to, know for sure whether or not it was working. He'd seen some, but he was questioning whether it was working. So just wanted to share that.
Cool. Okay. And then just for a quick, for anyone, if anyone's watching, apologies if there's any lag. Is that the expression? I'm looking to the younger Katie for the modern expression. My internet's not great here. I'm up in the Scottish Highlands for anyone that's watching this from the UK. And occasionally I'll get a lag or the internet's not great. So I was just saying to Katie, hopefully in about a month's time, we're going to have it all fixed and up and running. So we'll be up at non-Highland normal speed of, where it all works good and proper. But whilst we're doing it, before I do that, if anyone's here and you've got any questions about the Sinclair method, if you've got any anything you want to add to it, it's fine. Thanks, Steve. If anyone's got any questions about the Sinclair method, if you got any comments about it, again, we always say that we aren't the only option for alcohol recovery, but Katie and I will tell you, well, we believe it's the best, but we're biased. But it's more important that what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that people, there's a lot of knowledge out there about all the other different options available, like your AA, CA, smart meetings, etc., etc. The Sinclair method and TSM is still little known it's getting more in the States. We're starting to get there here in the UK. But really what we're trying to do with these, I've started doing a lot of TikToks at the Sinclair method, if anyone's on TikTok, at the Sinclair method. And I'll get Katie to promote your TikTok later on. But we're trying to do a lot of social media stuff. We're trying to do a lot of online stuff like this, where we can get the message out to people. We can explain to people what the Sinclair method is first and foremost. And more importantly, my background was working in alcohol and drug rehab center management. And it's learning, it's not comparing, because it's not that those models are not good. But when you start working in a program and a model that is working so well, you just want to shout about it from the rooftop. With that in mind, if anyone is new, Katie, can I jump on you again and just say, can you just explain basically what, in your words, the Sinclair, what is the Sinclair method?
Yeah. So, like you said, it's not very well known. I feel like it's a very much a grassroots effort to spread the word about it, which I think is why we're, reaching people on social media, because they're looking for an answer that's alternative to the traditional, AA, go to rehab, because a lot of people, that serves a certain percentage of people, but a lot of people just know it won't be for them, or maybe they've tried it and it hasn't worked. So this method, one of the most unique things about it is that it's not an abstinence-based method. You actually start it while you're still drinking, and actually requires someone to keep drinking alcohol. And the reason for that is because when someone is doing the behavior, the same behavior that's, driving the addiction, in other words, drinking the alcohol, but they do it taking naltrexone medication beforehand, which is the cornerstone of this treatment, is this medication called naltrexone or nalmefene in the UK. When they take that medication before they drink, typically an hour or so, at least an hour, it's going to be blocking the endorphin reward reinforcement that someone gets when they drink alcohol. So they're doing the same behavior that they're addicted to, but they're not getting the same reward. And I think any logical human being can realize that if they're not getting the same reward that they used to get, they're probably going to want to do it less often over time. One of our providers in the US, one example he used is like, if you are going to work and they stop paying you, like you're probably going to stop going eventually. And not a perfect analogy, but when you're drinking alcohol and you're not getting the same reward, what happens for a lot of people is they want to drink less. They might have one or two drinks and just feel satisfied at that. Or other people eventually may go alcohol-free or almost alcohol-free because alcohol is just not as rewarding anymore. It takes time to get there. It took me 9 months to reach extinction, meaning being to this place where I felt like I was cured, quote unquote. I know that word is kind of debatable, but I felt cured of my addiction. It took about 9 months, but over that time, my drinking just continued to reduce. And a lot of people want to know, okay, well, does that mean drinking's not going to be fun anymore? And I don't think that's the case at all. I personally enjoyed drinking more on the method because I had control. I could trust myself again, and I would still enjoy 1 or 2 glasses like I might enjoy, a scoop or a double scoop of ice cream, but I'm not going to have a second, third, fourth, or fifth ice cream cone. I'm satisfied with the one. And that was true with alcohol as well. I could enjoy a glass or two and then just be like, no, I don't want more. That sounds a little bit gross. So that's the basics of the protocol. What might you add to that, Bruce?
you've done it perfect.
Yeah. And just, like it's got decades of research behind it. It's, not this thing that Bruce or I invented. Sometimes people think that we're creating a new method, but this was here long before we got involved in it. And I think one of the greatest things about it is there's objective data out there to prove over and over and over again that this treatment works really well for most people. And so even though it sounds crazy that you're continuing to drink when you have a drinking problem, it makes sense because we know that abstinence has a high failure rate because of what the term alcohol deprivation effect, which is essentially means when you quit drinking and you're addicted to it, you crave it more. You get deprived of it. And that often leads people to relapse. So with this treatment, because people can continue to drink, paired with the medication, it helps their brain essentially unlearn the behavior of alcohol use disorder.
That's quite interesting because it's literally turning the standard model of recovery on its head.
And that's why some people are so upset, right? They're like, you're insane.
Yeah. And it is. I mean, that's because I'd worked in the industry for a number of years. When someone came along to me, or it was Claudia Christian's YouTube TED talk I saw, and Claudia was talking about taking a pill and carrying on drinking, and I thought that is an absolute load of rubbish. Anyone who struggles with alcohol, you don't tell them to carry on drinking. That's the last thing you tell them to do. It's right. The only solution is you're struggling with alcohol. They put up their hands and say, I'm struggling with alcohol. The only option is stop. The only thing you need to think about is, am I going to use AA as my support program to help me stay stopped? Am I going to use CA, NA? Am I going to go to rehab, acupuncture, horse therapy, go to Tibet into one of the monasteries, whatever it is? I mean, it's... but I've been talking a lot on TikTok recently about something that's really, really struck me, is that if the number one cause for relapse on an abstinent-based program or an abstinent-based model is craving. So what happens is when we drink alcohol, it produces endorphin in the brain. The brain eventually becomes dependent or addicted to that endorphin. And when you take that endorphin away from the brain, Dr. Sinclair found that the brain drops into something that he called deprivation. You're basically starving the brain of something that it has now become addicted to that is very, very rewarding, very pleasurable. It's like whoosh, it's like you've taken it away.
Yeah.
So that deprivation creates craving. Then what happens is over the weeks and months when someone goes on an abstinent-based program, they stop drinking, deprivation, the craving builds and builds and builds. And eventually someone gives into that craving, they have one drink and whoosh, they get that huge endorphin reward. So when people are relapsing, they're not relapsing because of external issues per se. I mean, that is the trigger or the match that lights the fire.
Yeah.
But the main cause is the craving.
Mm-hmm.
And Katie and I and everyone that's working in it, Matt Brindley here that I work with as well, and Steve, we're always telling everyone that there's a 78% success rate. Now, when I heard that from rehab days, no, that's just the biggest load of... Sorry, Katie, when I heard about it, I thought that's the biggest load of American rubbish I have ever heard in my life.
Oh, I never heard you say that before.
I don't normally say that bit. But not until you do the science and you check the science and you check the new... What is it that actually causes... We looked at how to prevent relapse all the time. We were experts at trying to prevent relapse. AA are experts at preventing relapse. CA, Smart Meetings, all these other organizations, they are experts at preventing relapse, but they never analyze or look at what causes the addiction in the first place. And if you can work out what causes the addiction from a neuroscience, which Dr. Sinclair did, you then find that the number one cause for relapse is craving. If you can eliminate the craving through the process that the Sinclair method does, you've got a huge success rate. So it's not... Matt says we're famous, just got to mention. So yeah, you're taking away that craving, and it's the craving that is the main thing. If you can remove craving, your success rate goes through the roof. And on the back of that craving, when someone stops drinking on an abstinent-based program, that craving continues. So you spend the rest of your life fighting that craving.
Yeah.
So the next question that I always ask Katie when she's on, and I know the answer because I've asked you 100 times, but you know it's probably coming, is Katie's been abstinent now for, I think you're trying to figure it out
5
last night,
years
weren't
or
you?
so.
About 5
Yeah.
years. What is your, because you've stopped drinking on a normal abstinent-based program, you'd be anxious, you'd be craving, you'd be white knuckling, you'd be. How easy is it to stop drinking on TSM?
It was incredibly easy, to be honest. I was terrified initially. I remember I'd been on the method for about a year and I was drinking about once a month, and I was not considering going alcohol free, even though I was drinking just once a month. But what happened for me is I went back to France, where my husband is from, and they drink wine all of the time there. And I was just planning to not drink on that trip. I just wanted to be alcohol free. It was like a 2 or 3 week trip, like no problem. I was drinking once a month anyway. But his family kept offering me alcohol because they drink it at every meal and they don't really speak English very well. And so I remember just telling them, like, no, I don't drink anymore. Like, I basically tried to like just get the point across, like, I don't drink, period, just so they would stop offering it to me twice a day at lunch and dinner. And I remember when I said that, I was terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, like the thought of not drinking is really scary. Not because I was craving it or desiring it, but just it had been such an integral part of my life for 10 years. But that was kind of the seed that was planted of like, would I stop drinking? Like, I don't know. But I just kind of, went along that trip, and then a month went by and another month. And after 4 months of not drinking, that was when I was kind of at the place where I was like, yeah, I actually do want to stop drinking. And so even though there was like this mindset shift I had to go through, and there was a fear around saying I was never going to drink again, I ended up getting to that place. But like today, I always say, like, maybe I'll drink again one day if the desire comes on and I have naltrexone. Like, who knows? Maybe I will. But I have so little interest in it that it does nothing for me anymore. Like, I don't have any interest in picking up smoking tomorrow, so it doesn't occur to me to do it. And the same is with alcohol. I enjoy alcohol-free beers and, coconut water and sparkling water. But like, I went out to dinner with friends last night. We were kind of at a divey bar that has really good food, and everyone got drinks and I got a non-alcoholic beer, and like, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. So yeah, compared to going alcohol-free before the Sinclair method, it was night and day. It was just a fight every day. Don't drink, don't drink. And then you have that urge that feels so natural to respond to it, to drink, but you can't. And so then you get annoyed and bitter because you can't drink and you want to. It's a completely different experience.
Wow. Yeah. I just blows my mind every time I hear it and talk about it. There are two, John Nichols, if you're still here, I'm going to get to you in 2 seconds. Matt is just because this question actually runs on to from what you were saying. What about withdrawals and the need for detox? When I worked in rehab, that before someone came into rehab, obviously they were drinking quite heavily, so we would have to put them through a medical detox with either diazepam or my brain's gone. The other one, can't remember.
Yeah.
I was going to say thiamine. It's not thiamine. Anyway, Librium.
Yeah.
So Librium or diazepam medical detox, so that when people would come in, they'd be okay. So how did you deal with your detox on TSM, Katie?
Well, yeah, like I was actually revisiting some old clips with Dr. Sinclair, the man who created this method, and something he said that was interesting, and maybe you've heard him say this before too, it's that the research shows that it's not the drinking that is harmful for the brain necessarily. I mean, certainly it is, but the thing that's most harmful for the brain is the stopping, because I am honestly not sure physiologically what's going on exactly, but it causes a lot of brain cells to die, and it's really bad for people to go through withdrawal. It's so hard on the system. And so with this treatment, there's no need for detox or withdrawal, and that confuses a lot of people. Someone just reached out to me recently and said, my doctor's requiring me to be abstinent for 7 days before I go on the medication. And I'm like, why is that? Like, I don't know if there's research that says that that's required, but with this treatment, the safest way to reduce your drinking or to overcome, an alcohol problem is to gradually titrate downward as opposed to stopping abruptly and experiencing the withdrawal effects, which can potentially lead to death or other, really negative health consequences. So with this treatment, you're still drinking, but over time you're gradually reducing. And so a lot of people don't experience withdrawal, or they might be super minor withdrawal effects, or they might find that they were kind of cycling in and out of withdrawal before this method because they were trying to abstain, and then they binge and abstain and binge, and the withdrawal symptoms went away on this treatment because, again, they're gradually reducing. So non-existent, essentially, for most people.
And it happens with anyone. I mean, Katie and I work with people from every level of dependency, for everything from, I've worked with a lady who was drinking 3 bottles of wine a week, right the way up to about 350, 360 units a week, which was a huge amount. It's equivalent of a bottle of Jack Daniels and 2 to 3 bottles of wine a day. So it's everything and everything in between. And we occasionally, if you find that the only reason that we would ever consider a detox, and Katie and I are not medical doctors or medically trained, but we work very, very closely with doctors. And this is a doctor's decision to make this one. But sometimes, well, very, very occasionally, the doctor that I've worked with, twice, I think, in the whole process, the doctor has advised, because of somebody's health condition and situation, plus the volume that they were drinking, it wasn't safe for them to continue to drink on a reduction program for another 3-6 months. So in that situation, we would, on the back of the doctor's advice, we would then recommend a detox, and then, but a proper medical detox, not just obviously someone just stopping drinking. So again, seek the medical advice on that one. So, but sorry, John, I've missed your question. You were up here before anybody else. So, I have a question about dose amount. I've been on now for about 2 months at 25 milligrams. It seems to work fine at this level. I am older and prefer not taking any more medication than I need. Katie, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, what I've learned over the years as a coach working one-on-one with people and having them share with me like what they're doing with the medication or what their doctor has advised is that essentially everyone is different. And 50 milligrams is the standard therapeutic dose that's been used in the trials and proven to be effective. But if this individual is using 25 and seeing progress with that and doesn't want to increase their dose, of course, I'm not a doctor, but if it were me, I might stick at that dose because I can appreciate not wanting to take more medication than you have to. I might just, try to be as mindful as possible to notice, if or when you're drinking, if you start to notice, the extra endorphin or reward or buzzy effects that comes from the alcohol as the medication wears off. You may not be protected for as long of a time frame potentially. Like, typically when someone's on a 50 milligram tablet, our physicians will have them redose at 6 to 8 hours. Some people less than that, some people more than that. But all in all, I would say if you're seeing progress and you feel good at that dose, then no need to change anything. Be mindful that maybe you do need to increase in the future if you're hit a plateau or, are experiencing again like the endorphin reward from the alcohol. But that's what I would say, because I have seen people who have done well at the 25 milligram dose. There's not research, as far as I'm aware, testing lower doses of naltrexone. But also, I will say on TikTok, I've gotten a number of comments from people who are on low dose naltrexone, like a couple of milligrams, and they were taking it for other issues. But they said, oh, I lost interest in alcohol as well on this medication. I didn't know there was a correlation. So they're on a very low dose, and not saying that's what, you should do or anything, but I think for some people it can even work in low doses. And of course, everyone is different. But that's my 2 cents. What would you say, Bruce?
No, I would agree completely with you. And I always say to people with abstinent-based models, it's a very, very black and white process. You either drink or don't drink. So there's no in between. You drink or you drink. You drink or don't drink. The Sinclair method it's a reduction program, and it's very, very specific for an individual. So you'll find with the Sinclair method, we're always talking about it, and Katie's on her platform and everything else. a lot of the information we give out in a place like this is what we call generic information.
Yeah.
So it's the advised information and advice for 95% of people that try it or go onto it. The work that Dr. Sinclair did say 50 milligrams. So the majority of people we work with, 50 milligrams is the right one. I do have a couple of clients who have actually done it the other way, where they started with 50 milligrams, they've reduced right the way down, and just exactly as Katie's saying, they've reduced down, and because they're then only drinking once or twice a week, they're having 4 or 5 days during the week where they're not taking any medication. So then they were phoning me up and saying, Bruce, I'm starting to get 30% of people will get slight nausea from the medication in the early days, first couple of days. But one lady I worked with, she got right the way down and she started to experience the nausea that she experienced in the first place. Yeah. So again, alongside the doctor, we spoke to the doctor, we took his advice and he said, well, listen, try 25 and see if it takes it away. But we very, very carefully, exactly what Katie's saying. We work with drink diaries here in the UK. So we said, keep recording the drink diary and keep a note of if there's any increase in exactly what Katie's saying, any craving, any increase in anything else, and let's just keep an eye on your drink diary and make sure there's no increase.
Yeah.
But sorry, going back to your question, so to just monitor it, and if it works, it works. So John, for yourself, what I would be saying is it's a bit difficult, and we don't want to ask you this in a public place, but it's really a case of where are you at with your drinking? The Sinclair method, the reason I was talking about it at the beginning, the Sinclair method is all about you regaining control on your drinking at whatever level you require it to happen at. So you may be at a position at the moment where you might be drinking 1 can of beer once a day and you're happy with that. The 25 milligrams is keeping you there and you're happy, you feel in control. It's not affecting your health, your relationships, your work and everything else. If that's the situation, good luck to you. Crack on. If you're finding that it's still out of control or it's still affecting other parts of your life and you feel that you want to take it further, then up the dose. So it's really it's up to yourself. All the research that Dr. Sinclair did was around 50 milligrams. So for the majority of people, it's 50 milligrams. But if you feel it's right, John, yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And I will say the last couple times I drank, I did do a 25 milligram tablet as well, because I was only drinking once a month and I didn't really have nausea side effects, but my stomach would get upset, just kind of like aches in the stomach. And I did like the 25 work just as well. I'd already reached extinction and I was just experimenting and it worked for me. So yeah.
And it was actually on your platform the other day, Katie, that I heard there was a guy, I won't mention names obviously, there was a guy that came on and he's 6'7". He's a monster of a guy. And he went to his doctor, a doctor that Katie and I both know, and he had a chat with him and he said, listen, he was 6'7", 6'8", big guy. You measure it in pounds in the States, he was probably 20, 21, he was a big lad. So he went to the doctor and the doctor said, well, listen, okay, because of the size of you, because of your metabolism, he said, let's try 75 milligrams. So he kept a record of it. Again, doctor said to him, I spoke to him last night about it, and or he was saying last night that the doctor said, keep a track of it, keep a track of what you're drinking and what you're drinking now. And he went up to 75 milligrams and his drinking dropped by 20%. So now again, the standard advice would not be go to 75 milligrams, but bear in mind, this guy is 6'7", etc., etc. But the most important thing is he'd been to his doctor and taken the advice from the doctor. So don't play around with the meds. Well, it's up to you. I mean, I would always say we have to always take the medical advice on it. So, So yeah,
definitely. And it varies person to person. It does. And I know Steve's talking about the research that's been done, and that's kind of our baseline. But like, I've worked with so many people the last 5+ years, and it's like I just see what works like for people in their own personal experience. And if someone can't tolerate the 50 milligram, but they're seeing progress, you know, at 25, it's like, okay, well, we'd rather you take the medication at a lower dose than be sick and not take it at the higher dose, you know, if that's working for you. So like Matt said, you know, TSM is so flexible. It can meet someone where they're at. You know, the same thing with redosing, you know, that's something that, you know, wasn't necessarily advised in Dr. Sinclair's research. But what we're finding in practice, like a gal was on our call this week and her doctor advised her to redose at 3 hours because she starts to feel the buzz, euphoric effects from alcohol after the medication's been in her system for that amount of time. So that's what her doctor is having her do. So it really is individualized where other people don't need to take a second dose for 6 hours or 8 hours. So it's really interesting. I love being able to work with people and learn from different individuals and really get the diverse experiences of TSM and what's working for people.
And the one important thing I would say, though, on the back of that is, this is not your case, John. When it comes to medication, that a lot of people, when you come across Sinclair method and naltrexone and everything else, a lot of people believe that the naltrexone pill is going to do everything. So Katie's always had an expression that the pill will do 50-60%, and that's pretty bang on. So and I describe it in a way that when it comes to AUD or alcohol addiction, alcohol dependency, you have the physical side of it, which is the neurological process that's going on in the brain, and the physical addiction and craving in the body. That's a physical thing. And you've got the habitual side, which is the emotional, psychological, behavior, habitual side. And that's why, we'll talk about it later on, that's why the program side of it is so important.
Yeah.
You need to have someone to walk you through that process as well. But taking the pill and not making any habitual behavioral changes is not going to work. It's as simple as that. But what the pill is doing is it's dealing with the neurological craving and addiction with that. But what some people will do is that they take the medication and then they think, okay, it's very, very common for someone to see an initial reduction when they first start on the medication. I ask clients for all drink diaries, and in most cases, majority of cases, I'll see a 30 to 50% drop in the first 2 weeks, and then it levels out. So quite often by week 4 and week 5, people are phoning me up and saying, I need to up my dose to 75. I need to go up to 100. And I say, well, no, you don't. This is normal. This is how it works. And then the 50 milligrams is perfect for you. You've seen the drop because it's lowered the reward. Now we need to get into the habitual program. But a lot of people are expecting, if I take 75 milligrams, I'll get another big drop. And then if I take 100 milligrams, I'll get another big drop. And they're trying to shortcut the habitual change. Which won't happen. So if someone's been on the program for 12 months, which I had one client in 4.5 years, if they've been on the program 12 months and we're not seeing any change, then we can look at increasing it. However, with that one client, they still came back to me and they said, Bruce, I hadn't made any habitual changes.
Right.
And
that's the thing. Sorry. No, it's so true. That's the number one thing that I think, and people are aware of it. You know, they know, they're like, I see that I'm drinking out of habit. Like most of the time they really are. Or they're just not ready to let go of, I always say the comfort blanket of alcohol. I had one gal who she'd been on the method for a while and was like, I'm giving up. This isn't working anymore. And when we met to discuss what was going on, she was, and I've told this story before, so forgive me if you've heard it, but she was talking about how, well, I love my nightly bottle of wine. Like my life would be so boring if I didn't do that every night. Like she really looked forward to it, still very much had it on a pedestal. So even though she's taking naltrexone, it's incongruent with what we're trying to achieve with naltrexone is ideally not drinking a bottle or two of wine every night, but she was still very attached to that habit and behavior. So of course the medication is only going to take her so far. If she really, still wants that wine, kind of like if we say we want to lose weight, maybe we go on a special diet plan, but then we're still binge eating ice cream every night. It's like, well, do we really want to lose weight or do we really want to have the ice cream? Yeah, I know. Believe me. I love me some ice cream. And that's okay. Like if that's where someone's at, I think the expectation they just need to have is it might take them longer, or maybe they want to restart the method when they really feel ready. But that's why we always hit home the importance of the behavior change, because I know for me, I remember just getting familiar with how naltrexone was working, and I could see that I could outdrink it or trick it, because not because it wasn't working anymore, but because I knew what to expect with it now. Whereas initially when I took it, it was like it just changed everything. But then I got used to how it was functioning in my body.
And there are so many. Thanks, John. John saying very interesting discussion. Thanks for all the terrific insights. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. The more I get involved with TSM, the more I start to realize what an amazing process it is. I mean, there are so many. Katie and I could sit here all night and just talk about different aspects of the program. Little things like, as long as you take your medication, as you're reducing down the weight, it's okay to have a bad day. So you can have a day when you drink a little bit of extra. As long as you've taken the pill, it's okay to do that. And then you have a bit of a wobble, and then you carry on. There's a whole bunch of different. Sorry, my phone just gone off. There's a whole load of parts of the program. When you get down to nothing, like Katie has, that it's okay to not drink for a while, and then all of a sudden, if Katie decided next week she was going to have a drink, she would take a pill, have a drink, and I can guarantee you that she wouldn't relapse. I can't guarantee it, but it's pretty high chance. So there are loads of different areas within the whole program that it's a very. Katie and I always talk as well about the Sinclair method being a very kind and gentle way of doing it. Now, when you're on an abstinence-based program, I always describe it as jumping off the cliff, and you hope that the parachute with 6 holes in it is going to hold you, and you jump off the cliff, and if you stay sober, every day you're fighting the craving. You've got to go through your detox first of all. You've then got to fight the craving. Then all of a sudden, you've got emotions that have been pushed down inside you for the last year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in some cases, that all of a sudden now you don't have alcohol to mask it. That's going to come to the surface, and it all depends on what happens. How can you cope with it? Are you going to cope with it? Are you going to manage it? And that's, again, that can then light that match for that craving. So, I mean, there's hundreds of different areas. We could sit all night and talk about it, but is there any area, Katie, that you still blows your mind?
I think for me, what's coming up is, because I tried to quit drinking alcohol dozens of times. I know Matt, I've seen some of his videos. He tried a lot too. I don't know if you've tracked how many, but I estimate dozens of times, because I would probably quit multiple times every month. Maybe I'd make it a day or two. I'd just be so hungover or so fed up from something I said or did, but then the craving would lead me back to it, whether it was a couple days or a couple months. And I just remember every time I would try to quit, I would be on that like pink cloud of sobriety where like, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to live a different life. But then as time went on and the craving started to kick in, the thought of never drinking again just seemed like a miserable life to live. And I now know that's because my brain was hijacked. It was looking for that reward from alcohol that nothing else could touch. We know that alcohol floods our brain with more reward than we would get from sex or, our best vacation ever. It's more reward than that. So of course, my future seemed boring and gray without this substance that had hijacked my brain. And so I would get over that initial kind of pink cloud excitement, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, I can't ever drink again. And that would just feel like a bummer, to be honest. And I always talk about the one time I made it 6 months without alcohol. It was really difficult, and I just wanted to drink every single day and knew that I was going to be drinking again in the future. It was just a matter of how long I could like white knuckle it that time. And I know, and I imagine this changes for people the longer they're sober. Their brain probably adapts back without naltrexone. But I know for me, I don't know how long it was going to take for me to get to that point. So now, number one, I don't have to say that I can never drink again. The option's on the table if I really wanted to. If I was really in France at a fancy restaurant with my husband, I could have a glass of wine if I wanted to. Like, maybe that will happen one day. And then number two, my future doesn't seem gray and bleak and boring without alcohol because my brain isn't addicted to it anymore. It just, the future actually seems bright and exciting. And I no longer, look to alcohol for that peak reward on a daily basis. So it's a completely different experience where I just feel freed. I feel cured. I feel as if the addiction never happened. If I've never been addicted to heroin, so I don't feel like, oh, I miss taking that drug or whatever other drug out there, cocaine or whatever. It's just, it doesn't occur to me. It's as if it never happened. So that's a real freedom for me.
Yeah. And thanks, Steve. Steve was pretty obvious. Yeah, when you write it this way, it makes it so obvious. If continuously increasing dosage was the deciding success factor, where would you stop? 100, 200, 300 milligrams? It doesn't work that way. Absolutely. And Matt's saying the bad days are part of the journey. Absolutely. But again, it's a very comfortable way of dealing with it. I've had one client that phoned me up. I'll never forget it. 23rd of December. I mean, it must have been 3-4 years ago. And they phoned me up on the 23rd of December and they said, this week I've just lost 2 members of my family, 3 or 4 days before Christmas. And they got right the way down to next to nothing. And they phoned me up and said, Bruce, do you know what? I'm just not coping here. I just need to go and get hammered. I just need to go and get drunk.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, and thankfully I'd heard something that Claudia had said literally 2 days beforehand. So it was meant to be. So I said to the lady, and I said, listen, whatever you do, make sure do not have a drink tonight without your pill. And I said, take your pill, and as long as you're safe and you're not going to drink crazy amounts. And I said, drink whatever you feel you need to drink to cope with the situation. She'd got this really bad news all of a sudden.
Yeah.
24th, it wasn't too bad. I always remember I picked up the phone on Christmas Day and I phoned her because I thought this is not good. And I thought I need to phone her. I phoned her on Christmas Day and she was in tears. And I thought, oh no, obviously she's still upset and grieving. But she said, do you know what, Bruce? She said, it was actually Claudia that said that she'd been through it. That's where I heard it. She said, you told me that I could drink what I wanted. Now, she said beforehand on an abstinence-based program, I would have had a drink and that would have been me relapse for the next 6 months. Now, she said, I had a bottle of wine on the 23rd, the night of the 23rd. And the next night I had 2 glasses of wine. And she said, today I'm just not really interested. So she said, and I took my pill on both days. It got me through that bad day. And I remember Claudia saying, she said, anybody in that situation would have had a drink. Well, most people would have said, you know what? I need to have a drink. But one, she didn't relapse. 2, she was in complete control. But 3, when I spoke to her about a month later, she said, do you know what, Bruce? She said, it's been the hardest month of my life, but I went through it sober.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand what she was getting at initially. And she said, it's the first time in my life that I've grieved naturally for something. And she said, although it was really, really hard, it's still been a lot more healthier for me emotionally and psychologically, because what I would have normally have done is just jumped into the drink and then 6 months later, I would have still been dealing with all the stuff that I hadn't dealt with. And I know Claudia was the same, and it's because I'd heard Claudia talk about it literally 2 days earlier, but she did not relapse. I have never seen somebody relapse on naltrexone yet. As long as you're 100% compliant with the medication. I've never read anything yet. Maybe Steve can go and dig something out, or maybe he's already dug something out. But I've never seen the actual science for it. But I genuinely don't believe it's possible to relapse on naltrexone. You can increase your drinking. You might drink more for a day or 2 days, but you cannot sustain it. You cannot sustain it. And it's just I absolutely love. It's a very, very, Katie, I think it was you that used the expression initially. It's a very graceful, kind, graceful. You can't, as long as you take your pill, you can't go wrong with it.
Yeah. And I would notice that, especially the longer I was on the treatment, there would be days where I'd have a really bad day, or when I would just be like we know people who drink, it's like those nights where you're like, I'm just going to like obliterate myself tonight, or at least that's what I do. I'm just going to drink like I want to drink tonight as much as I want. And there would be times, especially the longer I was on the medication, where that would be my goal. And I would take the naltrexone, but then I would like not be able to have more than 2 or something. I was like, oh, I was planning to get like blackout drunk tonight, and the pill prevented it. And granted, I'd been doing a lot of work to change habits and things like that. But it would be interesting just to see that happen, where my plan would be to get really drunk, but with the naltrexone, it was like, oh, I can have 2 and I just don't want any more. But we know people can also drink through the medication, but like you said, like if you've got the medication in your system, even if you drink too much, the medication is still working to block the endorphin reward. So it's still working in the background. Even if your habits haven't caught up yet, the medication is still blocking the euphoric effects, which when you do that over and over and over again, your brain unlearns the behavior as a rewarding activity. But the challenging part comes in for us to consciously decide, like, okay, I don't want to drink as much. Like, now what am I going to do? And like your client with that difficult situation, that's the challenging part. We have to learn to strengthen our coping muscle and find other healthier ways to deal with things like that in life. But the cliche, as you do it, it gets easier and easier to do. As you stop relying on alcohol so much and start to cultivate other ways to cope, it just gets easier over time. And I mean, for me, I found that I started to prefer those things because I would consider alcohol like, yeah, I could drink, but it's not really going to do any good. Or I could do this instead. And I started to prefer the other coping mechanisms over time.
And then something else that I found, this was one thing, and I think this is I picked this up from working in. I worked in abstinence-based models for a number of years. I worked in management of rehab centers, and one of the fascinating things I learned was the difference between the treating alcohol dependency as a neurological condition rather than willpower, and all the side effects that come with that. It's not just a case of knowing that and then, oh, that's great, and moving on. But the reason why I'm saying it for was people would come into rehab with us. We were a 6-month program. They would come in. We would keep them sober because it was a very controlled environment and a safe environment for 6 months. Then people would leave. Within the first week to 2 weeks, they'd relapsed. And we think during the first 6 months, they'd had what we call a key worker, a one-to-one person they worked with. Yeah. They would have group work. They would have afternoon, I won't call it what I called it yesterday. They'd have afternoon employment project work, slave driving. They would work in the afternoon. They would then have social things that went on in the evenings to keep them busy, etc., etc. So they would keep people sober for the 6 months. They would leave, and then a week, 2 weeks later, they've relapsed. They would come back in again 6 months later. We would find out why they relapsed. And at that point, we would then put them into therapy. We would put them into counseling and to see the psychiatrist and therapy and everything else. Because people say to us, well, where's all the emotional support? Where's all the therapy in the Sinclair method? And this really concerned me when I first got involved, because in rehab, counseling and therapy is vital. We do that loads. So all of a sudden, someone would come in the second time, we'd find out why they relapsed, and then if it was because of an argument with the partner, we would put them into couple counseling for the next 6 months. Then they would go through all the group work again. They would go through all the key worker work. They'd walk out the door and relapse. And I'd go, what's going on here? Something's not right here. And then I realized from the Sinclair method, that once the brain becomes dependent on the endorphin, people are drinking on an everyday process, not because of the unresolved issues, but because the brain is now addicted to the endorphin. And then, so the reason that person was constantly relapsing had nothing to do with the argument with his wife. It had nothing to do with the marriage that broke up 20 years ago, that we were trying to put him through so much counseling for. That poor guy that I was thinking about, he'd been so counseled, he'd been cancelled out. He'd been that everyone sort of said, well, we need to get you some more counselling. We need to get you. But when you understand that the reason that he was relapsing because with the craving built, naltrexone will deal with that. It's a neurological condition. And when you treat it as a neurological condition, now please don't get me wrong, that counselling, the minute the brain becomes dependent, when Katie and I deal with clients who are struggling with a neurological addiction process in the brain and the body with naltrexone and behavior. So during that process, we will recommend additional support as they are reducing if required. So it doesn't mean that everyone doesn't need it, but the reason people are relapsing is not because of unresolved issues. the reason people are relapsing is because there's a neurological condition.
Exactly.
Well said.
Well said, Bruce. Yeah. Because if the desire isn't there, like I've gone through so many difficult things since I've quit drinking, and they've kind of been an interesting test of like, am I really at extinction? You know, because my old self would have defaulted back to, oh, I need alcohol to cope with this. And it's like, when I go through those hard times, alcohol is not even an option on the table, just like cocaine isn't, or cigarettes aren't, you know, like, sure, I might eat more ice cream. I might do more doom scrolling on social media. Like I have other unhealthy coping tools that I fall back to, but not nearly as destructive as the alcohol. So that's so freeing because, yeah, like to not feel like I need something to get through a difficult time, to know that I can get through it on my own, like that's like just rewarding in and of itself. Like we talk about alcohol being a reward because of the endorphins it produces in the brain, but if you see yourself get through a difficult life circumstance without relying on any substance, like you are so much better once you're on the other side of that. You trust yourself more, you have a different outlook on life, like you can rely on yourself more. It's just that's so rewarding in and of itself.
And John saying, great discussion, so many good points. I'm going to bookmark the session. There's lots of different places. Katie is all over YouTube. If you just type in Katie Lain YouTube in YouTube, every video with Katie Lain, and it should be Katie Lain. Okay, Katie's got a bunch of them on there. If you go to what's your WhatsApp? What's not your WhatsApp? Your
TikTok. Yeah, all the social media is just Thrive Alcohol Recovery. So if you search that anywhere, you'll find us. Yeah, always putting out content. I know you are too, Bruce.
Yeah, and again, if you go with TikTok, if you go on to @the Sinclair Method, Matt Brinley, who's here, is my partner in crime for a new business, not a new business, but a new thing we're setting up. So Matt has done a bunch of videos on Rethink Drink. I keep calling it something else, and I need to stop calling it. I'll be honest. I'll tell you straight. I keep calling it Thrive.
Thrive is shorter. It's easier to say.
What we're actually called. It is, yeah. Don't tell Matt that, because Matt and I have had a good discussion this afternoon, and I had a revolution about how to push a button on my phone, and it was Matt just looked at me and went, "Oh dear." Oh dear.
Different generations
Matt
might, right, Matt? I can relate.
Yeah, Matt
I love the name
amazing.
Rethink Drink. It's so catchy. Sorry, I think there's a delay. We keep talking. Go ahead.
No, go on.
Oh, I was just saying I love the name Rethink Drink. I think it's really clever, and it defines exactly what the Sinclair Method is. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that was Matt's brainwave. So give Matt the credit.
Brainchild.
And again, Matt and I will be doing a live. We'll be going to do more lives here as well. Rethink Drink, TikTok, Facebook page. There's a whole bunch of stuff as well. And John's asking how the unicycling is going. I haven't unicycled for about a month. I unicycled solid for the last 2.5 years. I think I've been diagnosed with an underactive thyroid.
Oh, no.
I think I've burnt my body out. I unicycled around a road called the NC 500 here in Scotland, if you know it, which is 500 miles of an old man still trying to learn how to unicycle, going up and down mountains, literally some of it. So my body had just gone into shutdown afterwards. So I think I've got an underactive thyroid, or I've got something. My bones, my joints, everything are aching at the moment. So I'm going to try naltrexone. I think LDN. I think will be my next stop.
That works for underactive thyroid?
Well, I don't know. LDN works for 800 different conditions. So
800?
Yeah, wow. 800. If anyone needs to look at that, it's ldnresearchtrust.org. ldnresearchtrust.org. And there's a search bar. If you type in any condition, it will tell you if it's any good for it. Whilst we're on that, if this is a random thing to ask, but if anybody knows Lewis Capaldi or has any contacts to Lewis Capaldi here in Scotland, I would like to get in touch with him. Do you know Lewis Capaldi in America?
No, who is that?
No. He is an American. He's a Scottish singer. Probably one of the biggest singers in the UK at the moment. But it works for an interactive thyroid. Oh, okay, interesting. Lewis Capaldi he suffers from something called Tourette's, but not as in vocal Tourette's, but as in they call them tics, where he's constantly moving around. Long story short, if you go on the LDN research type it into there, the cause of it is too much endorphin.
Huh.
And LDN, I genuinely believe, would help. He stopped doing live concerts because his tics are getting so bad.
Wow.
And I heard him being interviewed the other day, and going back to my counselling thing, and he said, I'm on my 5th therapist, and they still can't get to the bottom of it. And I'm sitting there going, because it's not a therapy issue, it's a neurological condition. You need naltrexone.
Wow, that's amazing. I did not know. Wow.
So if anyone has any close connections with, or any where I can't even get an email address from. So if anyone knows him or has got an email, please forward it on.
Oh.
So
yeah, powerful medicine.
It does work for underactive thyroid. Thanks, Matt.
I'm gonna check that website out. Thank you, Bruce. You said LDN Research Trust?
.org.
Okay, cool.
And there's hundreds. I mean, you can type in Parkinson's, MS, ME, breast cancers, whole bunch of stuff. And it's done, there's a whole bunch of videos and interviews all done by doctors and specialists within that industry.
Wow.
So it's massive. There's someone I spoke to recently who in Australia, a friend of ours, who'd had an operation on a disc in the back of their back. And to get over the pain, they gave them very strong opiate-based painkillers, but they also prescribed 3 milligrams of naltrexone. And I said, why are they giving you the naltrexone? Because it's going to reduce. And they said the low dose of naltrexone takes away the addiction of the very, very strong opiate. So I was like,
wow,
oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
So they can stop the painkiller when it does get better down the track, and they're not going to become addicted because they're taking 3 milligrams of naltrexone.
Wow.
It's incredible.
That's so cool. I had no idea. And interesting.
So LDN is another. Yep. So, and Parkinson's, the reason people have tremors with Parkinson's, it's overactive endorphin in the brain or too much dopamine. So low dose naltrexone will regulate it and control it. So not in every case. I'm not a doctor. Please check it out with your doctor before you do anything. So
I mean, that website's full of information. That's really cool.
Oh, it's massive. And there's lots of videos done by doctors of like breast cancer specialists and Parkinson's specialists, and there's thousands of illnesses that it's effective for.
So cool.
Thousands. That's us up an hour already. I can't believe it. It goes past quicker all the time. So
yeah, great conversation. Thanks everyone who participated today.
Yeah, so thank you for everyone. If anyone needs to get in touch with anyone, if you're in the States, thrivealcoholrecovery.com, or if you're going through TikTok, Thrive Alcohol Recovery, TikTok, YouTube, Katie Lain, Instagram, I'm guessing it's the same, Thrive Alcohol Recovery.
Thrive Alcohol Recovery, yeah.
I'm at the Sinclair Method, at the Sinclair Method on TikTok. I'm starting to do quite a few lives. We'll appreciate some support on those because sometimes people just tell us exactly what they think.
Yeah.
They know nothing about the subject, but so it's appreciated, some support. Matt is doing a lot of videos on Rethink the Drink. I've got it right this time. So go and have a look at Matt's a success story again, like Katie, and he's got an amazing way of explaining and putting things forward. Matt and I are going to be doing some lives on here at some stage we'll be doing some live TikToks as well. So there's a bunch of stuff everywhere to have a look at. Thanks for putting that link up, Steve. Okay, well, thank you very much to everybody. And if we can be of any help to anyone, please get in touch. Don't get me on TikTok, or I'll tell them back exactly what I think. Now, there's a point, Steve. Steve, I will text you when I'm on TikTok. You can be my admin, and you can. Now, it's amazing how many people do actually stick up for you when you need to get on there.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many people do actually come and stick up for you when someone's just ripping you to shreds. But thankfully, is it Matt that said it this afternoon? I think. Thankfully, there's a block button on it. You can just.
Yeah, that's a great tool when you're being attacked by people that hate you. Hate your message. It's like, oh, that.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And we're here the first Wednesday of most months, not every month, but most months. And so any questions, please feel free to get in touch. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.